Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. As always, following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful those opinions may turn out to be. Um, Again, if you're a first time listener, as we do get those a lot, this is a program where we come onto your radio dial approximately every Tuesday at 12 p.m. to tell y'all what is really going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so called United States of America, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, and in particular, taking a critical eye to the mainstream corporate media. This is Media Cyphers. So we got a lot to talk about on today's show. Hopefully, my co-host will be able to join us. I was able to fix my Zoom problem. I had to uninstall it and reinstall it. I blame Mossad. They put some virus. They put some viruses on my computer, whatever, for being an anti-Zionist. Yam Israel Chai or whatever they say. Anyway, this man's been yapping against genocide too much. I gotta go mess up his computer. No, it's probably just one of those things. Um, but yeah, like I said, hopefully, co-worker. Well, I mean, I guess we, in a sense, we're coworkers, but co-host should hopefully be able to join me later on today to talk about some of the issues of the day. Wanted to start off. We've got some really important Michigan stories, and I'm going to do a little bit of bad news, good news. We'll do the bad news first. And this is a good article from Bridge, Michigan. You may have heard, and hopefully you're sensibly outraged about this, but Trump administration has new rules that is really gutting the U.S. Forestry Service. And that impacts us pretty hard here in Michigan because, obviously we're Michiganders. I don't need to tell you twice. The ample woodland and forestry of both the lower and upper peninsula is one of the kind of prides of our state. And it is hitting us right here in the state of Michigan. So I'm going to go ahead and read from this article. It was published April 3rd, written by Kelly House. Trump administration plans closure of 4 Michigan forestry research centers. The Trump administration plans to close 4 U.S. Forest Service research facilities in Michigan, shifting scientists out of the state as it reorganizes and consolidates the agency. Officials have not announced a closure date for their facilities located in the lower peninsula communities East Lansing and Wellston, between Manistee and Cadillac, and the upper peninsula communities of Houghton and Leonzie, saying changes will be implemented over the next year. And also, again, solidarity to our fellow students and comrades over at Michigan State University. The closure of that East Lansing Forestry Service is sure to impact them disproportionately. Forest Service headquarters will also move from Washington, D.C. to Salt Lake City. And what Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins described as a measure to save money, boost logging, and put workers closer to the landscapes we manage. Oh man! So this is going to come up in the context of the article, but I do want to just pivot and stop right there. This is all about, I mean, it's in the Project 2025, and it's in just about any like in the stage capitalist playbook you can think of. The idea of we need to just the National Park Service. They want to privatize, sell off, and essentially like sell the resources off. They're not really being sneaky about it. And yeah, of course, logging does happen. If I don't need to explain to everybody where lumber and paper comes from. But to an extent, the lumber industry has been regulated from where it was in 60s, 70s, where it was largely unchecked and there were not sustainable practices. Now, that's not to say overlogging doesn't happen, but what I am saying is this latest move from the Trump administration is really going to accelerate and hypercharge resource extraction in places that for literally the last century, since Roosevelt established the national park system, have been viewed as like sacred public spaces that should be untouched. And Donald Trump, being Donald Trump, and the sycophants around them, they do not see the beautiful trails winding through the Appalachian Trail. They do not see um, they do not experience the joy of hiking, spending a day hiking through, Kellogg National Forest, or, going up north and, exploring the beautiful national parks up in the Upper Peninsula. They just look at all of that green and see green. They see money. They see ways to make their friends in the logging industry richer. And it's worth, sounding the alarm bells about this, because these people really don't have any inhibitions about tending or preserving the land. There are some Republicans who, at least, again, their ideology is a bit confused, but they do have, at least have, like, this very sincere connection to the land around them. But again, these people, it is literally, you are putting the fox in charge of the hen house, or, in this case, the the timber company in charge of the forests. Literally, they're basically the Trump administration's aim is to consolidate the Forest Service and basically turn it into a middleman for the timber industry, to extract profit, chop down trees, sell them, etc. The bad old days of overlogging could very well come again. Um, Now, do I believe that there's sufficient public pressure to push back? I think we can take some lessons from Michigan's recent pushback against AI data centers, and the way that um, that issue really transcended the typical partisan lines. And that's saying a lot, because we are so hyper partisan in 2026 compared to where we were even like 10 or 20 years ago. But it seemed to be an issue that really brought, again, rank and file, average everyday working people together, regardless of their, political ideology. We do not want these AI data centers. We do not want them, using our water, hiking up our energy bills. But also, and this was a very important aspect of it, again, to people regardless of, whichever, party they vote for, the preservation of natural land, the preservation of forests and prairies and farmland, that is very important to people. And I do wonder if we are going to see some of that kinds of grassroots pushback, if and when the Trump administration really starts going after our state and national forests here in Michigan. Although I guess the more jurisdiction over the national forests than the state ones, I should say. Anyway, the announcement. I'm going to go ahead and keep reading from the article. The announcement prompted dismay in Houghton, where workers with the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station collaborate closely with researchers at Michigan Technological University and the Michigan DNR. A smaller group in Land Z conducts forest inventories and analysis. It's very disappointing, said David Flashbowler, Dean of the university's College of Forest Resources and Environmental Science. I understand priorities change from one administration to the next, and this administration is interested in increasing the volume of timber that is coming off of the national forests. Man, that is really like the most polite way I could. It's honestly like, look, this is like crisis code red. you know, I understand, especially the way that he's a dean of the College of Forest Resources. You have to be very measured with your words, but like, dude, come on, this isn't just like, oh, it's a minor policy. It's like, no, like the most sociopathic capitalists you've ever seen are licking their lips and looking at our trees. That is what's going on, my man. All right, you can tell it like it is. Jeez. Anyway, Flash Bowler estimated between 20 and 25 people work at the Houghton station, including scientists and other staff. The station has a multi-decadal history of partnerships with researchers and foresters in the UP, he said. The heavily forested Upper Peninsula contains more than 8 million acres of forest land, split roughly evenly between private or locally owned timberland and state and federal forests. Beyond conducting research that aims to keep northern forests healthy and productive, Flash Bowler said, the lab is an important economic contributor to a region with scarce jobs. This lab, with its many employees who all had salaries and invested in the region just like any employed person does, that's going to be lost. The Michigan facilities are part of a network of 57 nationwide. 19 will remain following the closures, with the Forest Service instead establishing regional hubs that serve multiple states. A Madison, Wisconsin hub will serve Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Missouri. Michigan DNR spokesperson John Pepin said leaders in the State Forestry Resources Division are not yet sure how the changes will affect the state agency, which works closely with federal partners. It's pretty apparent that the details and individual impacts to a lot of programs are not worked out yet, Pepin said. The biggest change appeared to be in Houghton, Pepin said. The facility houses the Northern Institute for Applied Climate Science, which Pepin said is relocating to Fort Collins, Colorado. Said DNR and university officials in Michigan and other Great Lakes states have worked closely with the Institute for many years, assessing the climate vulnerability of forests, developing adaptation strategies, and applying it to forest management. It wasn't clear whether layoffs would occur as part of the reorganization, but the administration's announcement emphasized the reduction of administrative duplication. The Forest Service will provide employees and partners with detailed transition guidance as different milestones approach, stated an agency release. So again, very kind of an eloquent way to put you're being laid off. Agency spokespeople did not immediately respond to email questions from Bridge, Michigan. I'm just going to go down a little bit. This is actually just the closing paragraph. Josh Hicks, Conservation Campaigns Director at the Wilderness Society, said, this reorganization will wreak havoc on the Forest Service management and organization, adding fuel to the unpopular narrative by officials like Senator Mike Lee that public land should be sold off to private industry. At a time when wildfires are getting worse and access to public lands is already under strain, the last thing we need is an unnecessary reorganization. So yeah, if you want to read that article for yourself, that is at Bridge, Michigan. It's written by Kelly House. Trump administration plans closure of 4 Michigan forestry research centers. That was published on April 3rd. Well, keep it dialogue. We're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Oh, also want to observe, since the last week's show, Trans Day of Remembrance happened, I'm wearing my colors. Thanks again to my wife, got me this shirt. It's a picture of David Lynch with the trans colors. Fix your hearts or die. If you know what that's from, well, I won't give you a prize, but you have good taste. Anyway, we will be right back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. I'm your host, Andy Argo. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So our next story, again, I told you I'd bring you a little bit of good news, and this is some exciting kind of grassroots community action coming out of Ann Arbor, our Wolverine friends to the east. But it's kind of, again, it's the antithesis of the last story we're talking about, where Trump is trying to gut the Forest Service, and this is about people from the bottom up trying to create a sustainable model for sustainable energy. They're in their community. This was written. This is from Michigan Advance. It's written by Carrie Byron and was published on April 4th. How Ann Arbor is creating its own clean energy utility. by the way, this was originally published by Grist. It was republished on Michigan Advance. So I correct that. So, okay. When Crystal Stewart started knocking on her neighbors' doors in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 2021 to discuss energy efficiency and sustainability upgrades, she was met with a lot of blank stares. She was new to the issues herself, she said, but the longtime social worker kept at her new job doing outreach for Community Action Network, a local nonprofit dedicated to serving undersourced communities. She slowly started getting people in her neighborhood to take part first in home energy assessments, then a city program to swap out appliances, make structural fixes, and more. In the beginning, it was kind of hard. A lot of people were reluctant. If someone is knocking on your door and telling you they can fix up your home for free, most people don't believe that, Stewart said. But she added, once one person tried it out, they'd tell their neighbors and others would jump on board. Now, the neighborhood, Bryant, is set to pilot a first in the country program that officials hope will speed the city's transition to renewables and offer a new model for how local governments can control their energy future. The idea is technical, but has sparked enthusiasm across Bryant and Ann Arbor. A new city created sustainable energy utility, known colloquially as the SEU. Rather than replacing the privately owned utility that serves Ann Arbor, the plan is for the city agency to run in tandem, offering a supplemental service that residents can opt into. If they do, they'll stay connected to the regular grid, but will be outfitted with solar panels, battery backup systems, or other infrastructure, drawing on that power for their home use and opening up the prospect of selling any excess. The city, meanwhile, would pay for the installation and maintenance of these systems, which Ann Arbor would continue to own, a vision of energy generation and storage distributed across the city. This is something that we talk a lot about when we talk, like kind of the small municipal level socialism that you'd see in the past, the idea of communally owned utilities. I think what they're doing here in Ann Arbor, it's very forward thinking. Also, again, a lot of people might be, to take the full step of like, we are going to replace DTE with this thing, which, by the way, is what I hope would eventually happen. But it in a way, it's less of a threat to DTE if you kind of start out this way. Now, if when they do get to the point where maybe there's enough capacity to break away from DTE, that's going to be a fight because again, DTE has a lot of money in the banana stand that is Ann Arbor and Southeast Michigan more broadly, and it's certainly not a corporation that's going to go down without a fight. But starting at just this very, community level, hey, our energy bill's killing you. Well, here's the thing you can do. We're going to install some solar panels, wind stuff, etc. And you're going to draw your own energy. If you have any excess, you can actually sell it back to the utility. It's helping working people in their wallets in a way that engenders naturally engenders goodwill. It's something that I've been kind of critical of certain climate. Again, I wish you could just tell everybody, "Hey, the climate apocalypse is real. We need to fix it." A lot of people are either easily distracted. Anti-climate science propaganda is more prevalent here in the United States than literally anywhere else in the world. But you can make that economic argument to just about anybody. And like, who doesn't like saving money? And again, I wish we could just say, like, hey, the world's doomed unless we do something. But, you got to meet people where they're at. Anyway, um, going on in the article, the plan begins in the coming months in Bryant, a 1970s era community with about 260 homes, many of which are officially considered energy burdened. A quarter of residents pay more than a third of their income on utilities in a neighborhood that is one of Ann Arbor's only areas of unsubsidized affordable housing, according to Derek Miller, Community Action Network's executive director. And I know some of my listeners know that feeling all too well. Some of the older houses in the Vine, neighborhood that y'all live in, especially in the winter, you can see, energy bills as high as four, five, six, $700, and even split among, four, five, six, seven roommates. That's still a pretty big hit in the pocketbook. Going on, the SCU is a major step in a years long process to address Bryant's energy affordability and sustainability concerns, and then expand the approach across the city. When we started having a conversation about how to decarbonize the neighborhood about 4 years ago, it felt outlandish. Now it doesn't feel like anyone can stop us. The appeal of the SCU became clear in November 2024 when a ballot measure on the proposal was approved by nearly 80% of Ann Arbor voters. A little over a year later, city officials are ready to implement the vision, said SCU Executive Director Shoshana Linsky. In late February, the city announced that it was accepting expressions of interest from residents and businesses to take part, accompanied by a flurry of community meetings, animated videos, and ads in local theater playbills. Customers who opt in will get two utility bills, one for the power supplied by these new city owned clean energy systems, and one for any power they're still drawing from the regular grid, which Linsky and her colleagues say will add up to less than they currently pay. Just like customers don't own a power plant, the city owns and finances the system up front, and they pay for that electricity through a monthly bill, Linsky said. She noted that the model could prove particularly helpful for renters who often get left out of green energy incentives. Signing up large multifamily buildings will be important to quickly expand the SEU's size, she said. In addition to installing clean energy systems at participants' homes, the SEU could build its own microgrids, something that would set it apart from other municipal clean energy programs. For instance, the agency could install solar panels on a school to supply power when students and teachers are in the building, and that power could go to other SEU customers when classes are out. Backers say the strategy allows Ann Arbor to build out its own green energy system with lower financial risk and lower potential for political or industry pushback. When coupled with DTE's planned investments in clean energy, these voluntary fee-based programs will accelerate economy-wide decarbonization while maintaining reliability and affordability. Ryan Lowry, a spokesperson for DTE Energy, which currently supplies energy to the city, said in an email. I'm just going to make a real quick aside because, again, I'm the anti-capitalist guy talking on the radio, to just say that DTE, we should not dismiss out of hand. DTE is looking into alternative energy models. Despite the Trump administration's huge push to, drill, baby, drill, more far-sighted capitalists in the energy industry do understand that that transition is already underway, and it's not a great idea to, put all of your eggs in one basket. Of course, the big concern is, once that transition is in full swing, we need to make sure that the community is in control of it and not DTE, who very much will probably, they will do what capitalists do, try to figure out a way to have a financial monopoly on these new technologies, these new green technologies. Um, and the SEU, in its own way, is kind of getting ahead of it. But I would pay really close attention to the potential of like DTE trying to buy the system out, or they're essentially trying to kind of get their tendrils into the SEU, because this is the way that the wind is blowing, and you know it's always as much as a lot of these technologies have been held back because of their interest in natural gas and oil. um, they are also going to have to adapt to a post-oil, post-gas world. And, of course, their priority is not the public interest, it is profit. Going down, excuse me. So it might seem surprising, and this is also a good point the article brings up. It might seem surprising that DTE, Michigan's largest electric utility, is supportive of the SCU. But industry experts noted that many investor-owned utilities are struggling under the unprecedented new demands for power. Having a local government try to help manage power needs could be seen as an asset, they suggested, though DTE will have no formal role in the SEU. That's another part of it too. Energy capacity is becoming more and more of an issue, and I'm thinking particularly in the context of Trump's misadventures in Iran. This is only going to exacerbate those energy problems. So municipalities getting ahead of it and installing renewable energy in their communities is a good way to kind of insulate us from the consequences of flailing empire. Let's put it away. So the approach answers a question prompted when Ann Arbor adopted an ambitious climate plan in 2020. That framework included an electrical grid powered completely by renewable energy within a decade, but a city analysis in 2023 warned it was likely to miss that goal by more than 40%. In order to reach it, the city would need to push DTE to accelerate its renewable energy buildout, or lean on state officials to do so, or detach from DTE entirely and create a separate city-owned utility, an idea that does have some support in Ann Arbor. And it also has support of this radio host, but anyway. From the city's perspective, these options seemed too risky or uncertain, Linsky said, until officials realized that the Michigan Constitution allows municipalities to create and run their own utility even if there's another present. And that's where the idea of the SEU was born. When University of Michigan researchers compared the four options, they found the SEU model had the greatest potential to lower energy prices and emissions, boost reliability, and help low-income communities. Overall, it came down to having some benefits of local control without some of the costs, said Mike Schreberg, a professor who led the research, noting a similar model should be possible in every state. Still, some worry the strategy does not go far enough. Advocates who want the city to break with DTE and replace its services with a utility fully owned by Ann Arbor are seeking a November ballot measure to set that process in motion. Organizers are currently collecting signatures, and Godspeed to them. I am fully in support of that effort. Brian Geringer, executive director of the advocacy group Ann Arbor for Public Power, said the SEU plan still leaves too much responsibility for the city's energy transition with DTE, again, a private for-profit energy company. But if voters do approve creating a fully public utility, he said, it would not mean an end to the SEU. The two approaches could work together, with the SEU focused on generation within Ann Arbor and a publicly owned utility able to make its own decisions on purchasing power. If you draw a circle around Ann Arbor, the SEU is doing stuff inside the circle, and we're interested in having the city control what comes in from outside of the circle, Geringer said. Like Ann Arbor, hundreds of cities are working to implement climate goals and running into similar gaps between ambition and practicality, especially when it comes to control over energy sources. Cities have set these goals, and utilities aren't obligated to follow those, said Matthew Popkin, manager for U.S. Cities and Communities at RMI, an energy think tank. So Ann Arbor's SEU is an example of cities taking more control of their future without dismantling or acquiring existing utility systems, said Popkin. That's a really interesting model. It's that intermediate, that it is the social democracy approach to the energy question. It's not fully socialist. It does still kind of account for a little bit of capitalism, in the mix there. But I think it's a good step in the right direction. And as I just read, there are people on the ground in Ann Arbor who are pushing to have just one main publicly owned utility in Ann Arbor, which I hope that should be the end game of this whole process with the SEU, and definitely something other communities, including here in Kalamazoo, we should be looking at. Hopefully, Consumers Energy doesn't get too mad at me for throwing that out there, but hey, that'd be funny. It's like, yeah, I've been harassed by fascists and billionaires for years, but don't mess with consumers. No, no, not really. Anyway. Other models also exist. In Washington, D.C., for instance, a program called the D.C. Sustainable Energy Utility has been operating for 15 years, overseeing the city's efforts to help residents use less energy. The initiative is far narrower than the Ann Arbor division, functioning not as a utility, but rather as an organization contracted by the city to boost energy efficiency and increase access to clean energy through subsidies and rebates. The program is a central part of the city's goals to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, and managing director Benjamin Burdick has helped cut some 10 million metric tons of emissions while saving residents more than $2 billion from reduced energy use. Nationally, the conversation that we're hearing about is around how do you continue to talk about climate with affordability, he said. Programs like the DC SEU are going to continue to be the way that we double down. The work in Ann Arbor is now receiving its own attention across the country. What caught my eye about Ann Arbor's efforts were the references to citizen involvement and co investment in their own grid, said Jim Gilbert, a retired medical product designer in Boulder, Colorado, who's now helping the city assess the Ann Arbor model. Boulder has dealt with recent power outages due to worsening climate impacts and aging infrastructure, and Gilbert said an SEU could offer a way forward. Back in Ann Arbor, as the city prepares to launch the initial pilot of its SEU, the plan is to reach half of the Bryant neighborhood by the end of the year. Local residents are all in, said Kristen Stewart. Older members of the community are particularly excited, she said, noting that many are on fixed incomes and will particularly benefit from lower energy bills. It's hard for me to keep up, Stewart said. Now it's not me reaching out to residents to sign up, they're blowing up my phone. That was Carrie Byron, Washington based writer and editing reporter on land, property, and cities for the Thomson Reuters Foundation. That was published on both Grist and Michigan Advance on April 4th. That was how Ann Arbor is creating its own clean energy utility. All right, we're going to take another quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online, Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. And please, like, subscribe, all that. The algorithms don't do us too many favors, being an unabashedly, leftist, Marxist podcast, uh, mom and pop podcast out of your Kalamazoo, Michigan. So, those likes, those reviews, those subscriptions, they really do help us. And, again, if you like the show, spread the word, tell your friends to do the same. Anyway, keep it dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your source for political revolution. Welcome back, everybody. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Next story, we're going to go back to some bad news, but it's another story about ICE here in Michigan. Comes to us from the World Socialist website. This is written by Anthony Callahan, published on April 5th. ICE presence increasing at Michigan healthcare facilities. One of the first actions taken by the incoming Trump administration was to direct agents of immigrations and custom enforcements to carry out stepped-up enforcement actions at healthcare facilities. U.S. Department of Homeland Security, parent department of ICE, issued a directive on January 21st, 2025, entitled Enforcement Actions in or Near Protected Areas. The directive superseded and rescinded on October 27, 2021, a memorandum of the same title, which placed certain sensitive locations, such as healthcare facilities, schools, courthouses, and religious centers, under special protection from general enforcement of immigration laws. DHS declared that the Trump administration will not tie the hands of our brave law enforcement, trusting ICE agents to use common sense, such sensitive scenarios. And again, honestly, obviously, as anybody who's been paying attention to the news at all the last year knows, common sense is basically the sense of brutality that ICE agents feel when they go and try to kidnap people from hospitals and things like that. Going on the article, Michigan healthcare providers are now reporting that encounters with ICE are becoming routine parts of their practice, both near and within healthcare facilities. Routine checkups now include monitoring immigrant patients for a basic fear of safety, particularly young patients whose family members have been arrested by ICE. In addition to enforcement actions at healthcare facilities, there are increased reports of individuals injured by ICE during arrests being taken to hospitals and emergency departments, as well as a greater number of people requiring emergency care while in ICE detention. On March 23, 2026, the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center and ACLU of Michigan sent guidance to more than 400 hospitals and providers in the state concerning the legal rights of immigrant patients. In this guidance, Healthcare providers are reminded that both federal and Michigan state law, including the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, requires emergency rooms to provide necessary treatment to anyone presenting with an emergency medical condition, regardless of immigration status or ability to pay. Thus, it is illegal to turn away or delay care to a patient based on their immigration status. Healthcare providers are further reminded that no law requires the affirmative disclosure of patients' immigration status to law enforcement authorities. Such unauthorized disclosures run afoul of HIPAA. That's, if you're not in healthcare, that's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which basically is trying to protect patient privacy, and the Michigan Medical Records Access Act, if done absent a valid judicial warrant, court order, or subpoena. Administrative immigration warrants or subpoenas not signed by a judge are insufficient for that purpose. The memorandum also advises that immigration officers are still constrained by Fourth Amendment bars against unreasonable searches and seizures, especially in the context of healthcare, where patients have reasonable expectations of privacy while being treated. The notice of patients' legal rights is unfortunately required, as ICE officers have been explicitly instructed to disregard the Fourth Amendment and break into homes without a judicial warrant. A high percentage of workers in healthcare facilities in Michigan are also immigrants, compounding the issue of ICE enforcement at healthcare facilities. An estimated 29% of custodial and maintenance workers and 9% of hospital workers overall are immigrants. Ali Vang, a Hmong refugee and relative of a Lansing area nurse, was arrested by ICE in early November 2025 and deported to Laos. The fear of ICE is by no means limited to immigrant workers in healthcare. Yusuf Rabi, the legislative director for the Michigan Nurses Association, states that healthcare workers' fear of law enforcement transcends the citizenship status question, especially in the wake of the January 24th, 2026 ICE murder of Veterans Affairs nurse Alex Preddy. Rabi continued that risks to nurses were possible even in conducting their day-to-day job and caring for their patients. Dr. Elliot Brannon, a family medicine resident in Southeast Michigan, stated that staff in a clinic where I work have expressed personal fears related to ICE raids despite their status as American citizens. Dr. Brannon also expressed concerns that the threat of ICE keeps many immigrant patients from seeking medical attention. Indeed, 84% of healthcare workers surveyed by Physicians for Human Rights reported moderate to significant decreases in patient visits since Trump returned to the White House, likely driven in large part by immigrant patients foregoing care due to fear of ICE. The Trump administration has devastated Medicaid through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is expected to end for 355,000 Michigan residents by 2028, including tens of thousands of immigrants. There are already widespread fears that Medicaid data is being turned over to ICE to identify undocumented immigrants. The March 19th, 2026 episode of The Pit crystallizes how ICE's expansion and its pressure on medical centers and healthcare workers transforms hospitals into instruments of state terror, with immediate consequences for both patients and staff. The episode in question depicts masked ICE agents with a zip-tied detainee turning an emergency room into a detention area. This dramatization captures what Michigan healthcare providers are now reporting as reality. Routine appointments and emergency visits are being policed, and medical personnel are pressured to choose between patient care and collusion with ICE. Tragically, this fictional scene is not hyperbole, but a reflection of current policy. DHS rescinded sensitive location priorities. ICE has been ordered to operate aggressively in civilian spaces, and hospitals are reporting increased encounters, detainees injured by or under the watch of ICE, and healthcare workers themselves being terrorized. The effect is to intimidate entire communities, foregoing care, subcontract medical labor and records to an immigration surveillance apparatus, and to deepen the fragmentation of the working class. Workplace defense is thus a necessity to resist deportations, medical neglect, and the commodification of healthcare in general, and an organized socialist response must be made to these ends. Again, that is from the World Socialist website. It was written by Anthony Callahan and published on April 5th. ICE presence increasing at Michigan healthcare facilities. We're going to take another quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. So, I think I'll be joined, hopefully, be joined by my co-host in about 10 minutes here. I wanted to read from an article at the Nation. This is something you've likely heard about, especially people in my audience, thinking through the recent revelations about Cesar Chavez, who again was a very famous, very famous in the pantheon of civil rights organizers in American history. Unfortunately, some basically revelations have come out showing that he uh, basically was very controlling and even kind of, sexually assaulted um, people within the movement. There's an article from the Nation I want to read from that kind of it really encapsulates a lot of some of the thoughts I have about it. It's written by Juliusa Nazelli Arqueiraya. The cost of making Cesar Chavez the face of a movement. Sexual abuse allegations against Cesar Chavez, the Chicano civil rights and labor leader, have reverberated across the Latino community and beyond. A New York Times investigation published in March includes accounts from two women who were 12 and 13 when Chavez abused them, and from Dolores Horta, Chavez's longtime collaborator and co-founder of the United Farm Workers. In a statement, Horta said she had two encounters with Chavez, both of which led to pregnancies. The first time I was manipulated and pressured, the second time I was forced against my will and in an environment where I felt trapped. These allegations are deeply disturbing and should not be minimized or explained away. They have rightfully prompted a re examination of Chavez's legacy. They also expose how much Latino history in the United States has been made to rest on one man. For many Americans, including Latinos, Chavez is the only Latino civil rights leader they can name. The over reliance on a single legible figure has flattened a much richer and more complex history, and we are seeing the consequences of that. When one man is made to stand in for an entire movement, the destruction of his legacy can be used to dismiss the movement's larger history and impact. Chavez's legacy has long been more complicated than the mythology surrounding him. In a Los Angeles Times review of Miriam Powell's biography is described as paranoid and dictatorial, with the organization he built characterized as resembling a cultish commune. Um, so again, I will link to the full article in there, but I think like what it really gets at is, I think a lot of times, America especially, we have a tendency to, uh, the whole great man of history thing. And, we should remember the farm workers movement was made up of thousands of immigrant farm workers all over the country working tirelessly for their rights. Now, certainly, we'll have people rise up in leadership who have certain skills, whether it's kind of charisma, organizational prowess, strategy, but people are people, and unfortunately, especially with like the nature of some of the allegations against Chavez, and we're in the Epstein moment. So hearing these things is really gut wrenching, but it should not minimize the tireless work of the thousands of farm workers who, made that again a movement worth remembering across history. And I think it's kind of an interesting, point of comparison. It wasn't too long after these allegations came out that you know, people on the left were really reevaluating his legacy. Some places are, there's a Cesar Chavez Boulevard or street or, almost every town, big city in the country. And a lot of places are reevaluating whether they should, rename them. On the other side, you have Donald Trump, who has, you know, uh, binder after binder after binder of sexual assault allegations, and from his hardcore base, you don't really hear much of a peep about it. Or people will print shirts to own the libs, like, I don't care if Trump is a pedo. Well, I haven't seen any of these out in the wild yet, but I have seen a few online. I gotta say, you'd have to have some big cojones to wear that out in public, because yeah, you support pedophilia, do you now? All right. Oh, well, so something less than nonviolent might happen to a person wearing a shirt like that. I'll just leave it at that. Um, but yeah, obviously I didn't want to read the full article, but yeah, again, I just to put a fine point on it, I think it's one of the issues that we have, especially as Americans, where we end up kind of deifying any particular person as the be all end all of a political movement. It tends to happen in the United States more than other places, because we do have, again, this is a very individualistic culture, and that's it's kind of easier to spin our myths that way. It's like, there's one great man of history got some stuff done, rather than the truer and greater story of thousands of farm workers working tirelessly to organize themselves, and make sure their demands would be met. So anyway, I will link to the full article in the show notes for y'all out there. That is from The Nation. It is the cost of making Cesar Chavez the face of a movement. All right, we are going to um, take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR, or online at widerfm.org. We You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast, which you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR. Joined now by my co-host Lawrence. Lawrence, how you doing today?
I'm all right, man. How you been?
Oh, since I'm doing relatively well, all things considered. Working a lot, and trying to, again, stay upbeat despite the horrors. And think, as I go into national, international politics, there was something particularly horrifying. There's a lot of rumors over the weekend. Well, Trump's and Walter Reed, whatever. It's kind of reminded me. There's that Avengers in-game meme that was popular for a while. It's like, don't do that. Don't give me hope. No. Um, but he's still alive and kicking, and alive enough to put out
I,
some of the most deranged tweets you have ever seen in your life.
I'm
Ostensibly
not
from
gonna.
somebody who has access to the nuclear football, which is particularly terrifying.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I felt that way during COVID when they told us that he had COVID and he took his mask off to start struggling to breathe. I was like, oh god. I was like, oh god. I was like, if there was ever a time, Lord. If there was ever a time, Lord.
Mhm. If you haven't heard, so again, because again, the news cycle moves at the speed of light these days. So obviously, like last weekend, he said the thing, open the effing straight, which was, again, a lot of people. It's like, wow, what a thing to say on Easter. But he escalated it even further. Essentially, he said, and I want to get the direct verbiage here. Um, the Basically, he
He said,
threatened Iran with annihilation. He said, essentially, the whole civilization will die tonight, if they do not cede, uh, and never be brought back again if they do not cede to Trump regime's demands. Now, a lot of people are interpreting this as, just him using very excessive language to talk about targeting civilian infrastructure, which is a war crime unto itself. Talking about hitting bridges, desalinization plants, which is particularly atrocious. This is Iran does have a history of droughts, and that is one of the primary sources for a lot of its population to have drinking water. So it's explicitly a war crime, but a lot of people are very deeply concerned with the way Donald Trump has been talking about this, and is essentially even JD Vance did not really tone down the rhetoric. Is Trump talking about like breaking a an 80-year taboo and actually like I don't even really want to utter the possibility just because how horrific something like that would be. But there is people are concerned he might be talking about using a nuclear weapon. And it is something I think even before he said this most recent deranged statement, something that a lot of people have been concerned about because, you are looking at an administration that doesn't have any of the typical moral compunctions about, war crimes and civilian death that nominally even again we've criticized every administration since the show started broadcasting of committing war crimes of one form or another, the way the Biden administration materially facilitated the genocide in Gaza. But I think we can all recognize that the deployment of nuclear weapons is a tier above all of that, something that the world has, with a lot of luck and a lot of diplomacy, has avoided since World War II. And a lot of people are deeply concerned. A madman has his finger on the button. What is going to happen?
Yeah, this is the same madman that talked about nuking a hurricane. Remember, like this is the same numbnuts that dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan, right? And recently there was news that when it came to the war, his generals would just show him a 2 to 3 minute compilation of bombs being blown up. They've treated him like a small child when it comes
See,
to
we're
just
winning, sir. We're there's so much winning. It's just
yeah,
God.
there's so much winning, right? So so is it possible that this this jagoff has said this? Yes. So much so, or the possibility that he could have um that he's thinking about taking drastic and extreme measures. 13 Democrats believe so. 13 Democrats have recently, I don't know if you've seen the update, has called for the 25th Amendment. Um, we're talking about Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Summer Lee, um, um, Sri Thanadar. Finally, Sri Thanadar did something correct once in his life, right? Instead of being a spoiler for Abdul Al Sayed. Like it's I can name the let me see if I can find the rest of them. I just saw it recently. But yeah, 13 Democrats. I need all of the Democrats. I need at least all of the Democrats to say no. It's 25th Amendment time. This dude is nuts. He's literally talking about maybe hitting, not just hitting civilians, because we already hit civilians. We've already killed over 200 civilians in Iran when we
Ugh.
dropped bombs on a girls' school. We've already committed excessive war crimes that should put this administration in the Hague. We need to go further. Like we need to get him out of office because he's going to do something that's going to be in that's he wants this man wants to be a figure in history. We didn't say a beloved figure in history. We didn't say a celebrated figure in history. He wants to be a figure in history. And if it's just like the mustache man, I'm not going to say, I don't want to say his name because I don't want the algorithm to nuke this video. But everybody knows who the mustache man is that we're talking about.
Hmm.
Uh, he wants to be recognized in history, And it's that scene from The Boys, right?
Hmm.
When Homelander's like, "Hey, I don't mind being beloved, but fear works just as well." And that's Trump's mind state right now.
No, exactly. And it, man, one thing that I think is interesting is just like, again, we started this conflict with the lowest amount of support, of any military excursion in U.S. history. And typically there is a little bit of like a rally around the flag effect, especially when U.S. personnel is starting to get, although the extent to which we've suffered losses, there is some speculation that Pete Hegseth is kind of trying to fudge the numbers on that. But there has not been a rally around the flag effect. There has been, again, people are, especially now that people are starting to feel it in their pocketbooks, the resentment and disapproval of the war is ratcheting up. There's funny. There's a conservative who tweeted on. So it's like, why do we get the feeling that like people are not rooting for America in this conflict? It's like, well, there's a reason I just said. Also, anybody who's paying attention, even to the corporate media, which can't avoid reporting on this stuff, we're blowing up bridges. Trump is bragging about blowing up civilian infrastructure. It's funny because like he put so much energy, and there's been so much money into consolidating media, into being a bullhorn for regime propaganda. But Trump, he puts his own foot in his mouth. He says the quiet part out loud. He says, "Here's the war crimes I'm threatening Iran with, and here's how we're going to do that." And there is no propaganda filter between those words and people's ears. So even people who are apolitical, even some of the people who are kind of drifting away from Trump, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, just basically did a big takedown on Twitter. um, you're starting to see people connect the dots and understand that like this is an immoral war. Our tax money is being used to murder innocent people over what? And the big question is nothing. Or a lot of people are pointing out, even people on the right, we're basically doing this at the behest of Israel, who pointedly will not even put its own troops in harm's way uh, into a potential ground invasion in Iran. Just folks who didn't know. So you know,
Also, sorry to cut you off, Andy. This is also what the evangelical Christian nationalist right wants. This is what the right wing fundamentalist Christians want. They want uh they want if you know the scripture from or if you listen to uh uh what's his name, the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, when he says Israel deserves the entirety of the Middle East. He said that out loud, and he said that to the troglodyte that's known as Tucker Carlson, right? Lindsey Graham has talked about how Israel in its country, it is the Lord's plan or things of that nature. It's divine intervention, it's divine will, right? The Secretary of War Crimes, right? That guy, he literally has a Crusader tattoo that says "God wills it" on his body, right?
mhm.
The Secretary, the Secretary of War. He's not the Secretary of Defense. I forgot his name. He's a nutcase.
Pete
White.
Hegseth, is it?
Yeah, Pete Hegseth. The white. Yeah, he's a. This is this the actions of bombing Iran and sending them back to the Stone Age so that Israel can expand is what the white nationalists in this country has been wanting for decades. And this is directly tied to the Christian fundamentalism and white nationalist movement. Christian nationalists. This is what they are because they're nuts.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would say too, if you're an elder millennial like us, like this isn't the first rodeo of this. Which is to say, a lot of us remember the the Bush administration. George Bush also kind of talked in these sort of Christian civilizational terms. There's this kind of infamous or famous instance of George W. Bush was trying to get support from the French. And he's trying to persuade Jacques Chirac to join the invasion of Iraq. And he told the French president at the time, Gog and Magog are at work in the Middle East. Biblical prophecies are being fulfilled. And uh, Chirac, generally he had to like phone his spiritual advisor and be like, "What the f is this dude talking about?" Um, so, this isn't the first time, even in this last quarter century, that an administration has talked in these sort of fundamentalist Book of Revelations terms about the Middle East. Now, I do think it's fundamentally more dangerous this time because, it's funny. It's almost like an inversion of the Bush administration because in that case, you had a Christian fundamentalist president with a more agnostic vice president who is more imperialist, who is more about making money through Halliburton, all that kind of stuff. This time, it's an inversion of that. You have Donald Trump, who is the kind of atheistic president, who obviously, like, come on, everybody knows he's not actually a Christian. He uses Christians in his coalition, in this very loose coalition, like stay in power. But people like Pete Hegseth, as you mentioned, they are true believers. The people who are making a lot of these military decisions. Although this time, again, it's that core difference between the Donald Trump is kind of allowing all this stuff to happen because of the information he's being fed. He is not very critical. There's no Dick Cheney style mastermind planning this stuff. Not that I'm trying to give any credit to imperialists for doing imperialism more competently, but it's worth pointing out that in this case, it's the people making the actual military decisions are the true believers this time, and the people making those decisions have the strategic acumen of a child playing with GI Joe figures in his sandbox. It's talking about Pete Hegseth. Um,
It is a sad state of affairs when we are giving credit to the Bush administration.
oh God,
It,
yeah,
that, that, that should let you know how far we have fallen
mhm.
when we are saying that when we're actually having the conversation that the Bush administration was better because the Bush administration didn't attack Iran. They knew it was a bad idea. They knew that this was a bad idea,
Yeah.
and chose. They
As much
chose
as
to do.
John McCain, sang a very catchy ditty about it, that was not enough to convince the Washington brass. But if you're younger and you don't know what I'm talking about, he went on stage this very awkward performance where like he's like people are like what should the United States government do next, and he's saying bomb Iran to the tune of Barbara Ann, I think an old Beach Boys song or something. Which is
Yeah,
again awkward, cringy, and gross, disgusting. Talking about you know joking about entering a war and killing innocent people, but yeah, it's you know it's amazing how I think even a lot of leftists understand like the United States military or United States government has so long maintained a monopoly on violence and imperialism because we do have a very well constructed well built military apparatus and machine, but the idiots are taking over the idiot house, and they're firing generals and people left and right who actually know what they're doing.
oh,
And
glad you brought that up. Um, because there's been some very wealthy, big influencers that are very stupid and said some very dumb things. And especially when it comes to black people supporting Trump. Trump recently fired during a war, mind you. This is during the war. Pete Hegseth and Trump's administration fired two black generals because they were black female generals, and he did not want to stand beside them. That is coming out of the Washington Post. That's coming from Axios. Look up the story. Not because these generals were unqualified, not because these generals were trying to be like Kristi Noem's husband and bimbo themselves up, not because of some scandal that harmed the uniform. It's solely because they were black and female.
Yeah, I think didn't they even say like wasn't this young woman denied a promotion because like essentially they said like the president is not going to like standing next to you or something like that. It's just blatantly racist, was it?
Uh, uh, Black military, but that's the thing. Black and brown uh, uh, military officers have been getting demoted and fired during this administration. And I want to remind people they're doing that during a war. A war, this non-war war that they're saying that has injured and or killed over 750 American soldiers. This is again, shout out to Axios, shout out to Democracy Now, shout out to because please because I love to make sure to cite my sources when we're talking about these things. All of them have confirmed, and also DropSite. DropSite's been doing the Lord's work on this, the
Hmm.
tail, and the lever. They've all pretty much confirmed that the United States government has been lying to us about the casualty rate. It's not 13 people. First of all, pause that for. I just want to make a note. 13 people is already bad enough in an offensive war with a country that was not an imminent threat to us, that didn't attack us, right?
Hmm.
Do you remember when Republicans made a big stink about Joe Brandon, about President Joe Biden, when he pulled us out of, what was it, Iraq or Afghanistan, and 13 American soldiers died, and they had an entire hissy fit about that, right? You remember
Hmm.
that? I
Oh
remember
yeah.
that. We
Hmm.
all remember how deranged they were about Benghazi, right? Because four, what was it, four American ambassadors died or something like that, right? They had 4 hour deposition with Hillary Clinton because of Benghazi, right? Over 700, over 750 American soldiers have either died or been injured because of Iran striking back at us.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's like, what's the argument now? It's, again, a lot of these conservative politicians want to dress themselves in like, with support for veterans, or of course they're defunding the VFW and all that stuff. But like, what's the ostensible like justification? It's like you have to go die. And by the way, it's not necessarily even just like go die for Israel. It's you have to go. Please step into this wood chipper. Which, by the way, anybody who understands military strategy, people smarter than the stuff than me, recognize what a big and deadly trap trying to deploy ground forces in Iran or Karg Island is. And they said a lot of people are going to die if that happens. And the argument is essentially what? Feed yourself into the wood chipper so that we can protect the U.S. petrodollar, which, by the way, would not be as in nearly as much danger if they hadn't started this war in the first place. It is a classic example of like it hurt itself in its confusion because, if we were talking about the U.S. petrodollar may be withering away over the course of the next several decades. This conflict is hypercharging and accelerating that. You've got Iran doing negotiations with European powers about buying oil in either euros or Chinese yuan. So, whereas we talked about the U.S. petrodollar, going away at some time in the next couple decades, or the Trump administration and its forces, you trying to use the U.S. military to kind of artificially keep the U.S. petrodollar alive, you're looking at a situation where, it's almost comical. They chucked the U.S. petrodollar out of a 10-story window into a beehive, and now they're telling the U.S., like all these U.S. soldiers, okay, you need to go in there and get it. You might get stung, but America first. uh,
Yeah, and and uh, to add to that, um, and I want to put this in context, folks. Over the last few months, we've seen the military raise their age of recruitment to 42,
oh yeah,
right?
that's right. Yep. Hmm.
We we have seen uh uh it was a Laura Loomer or Christian Nome or one of them before they got fired. Um, they were asked about a draft being put into place, right? Because of this war, they have sent troops, more troops to the Middle East. A family member of mine that was a family member of mine uh, is being sent over, will be sent over for a year now, right? Even though she has two kids, right? But she's still a part of the army. She still works for the army, right? They are escalating this, and whole this whole reason why they wanted to, and again, give all of the speculation that you want about this war. It's probably true. Did Israel want to expand? I mean, look at what they're doing in South Lebanon. They have destroyed, bulldozed, and been trying to ethnically cleanse South Lebanon. South Lebanon right now looks just like Gaza.
Yeah.
That's not a coincidence. Um, they're talking about you have Trump threatening Iran because they didn't understand that Iran was much more powerful of a military force in fighting back than they expected. And now, because the bully got punched in the mouth, now the bully want to come back with even bigger straps.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, this is this is going to get worse way before it gets better, and this is why I need more than just 13 Democrats that the 13 Democrats saying um, we need a 25th Amendment.
Yeah. There's this person on the street interview I saw in Iran. This kind of came across my feed, and I think it really encapsulates the just complete strategic malpractice of Donald Trump's administration. They were chatting with this woman who is young, like in her 20s, and they're talking about how she was like on her way from court. She had to pay a fine for not. She failed to wear a hijab in like a public place. They caught her on like CCTV footage, and she talked about being really annoyed about that. And then they pivoted to talking about the war in Iran. And this is somebody who is saying on camera, I'm really critical of this theocratic element of the regime I live under. But when it pivoted to the war in the US, she was just like, we will fight to the last person. We are not, this is an existential threat to Iran. We are like, they did exactly the thing that would even make a lot of internal critics of the Iranian regime rally around the flag. These are people who are not just going to like give up and let themselves live underfoot of the United States. They are too angry, they're too educated, and they have too much of a deep history. They understand American intervention. They remember when we overthrew their democratically elected leader in the 50s and installed the oppressive Shaw. They remember this stuff. They do not forget. And the idea that the Trump administration had that they could just like swap out the leader overnight, pull like a Venezuela or something, is it's
Yeah,
gonna be like one of the great. They're gonna talk about that as just like one of the great historical military blunders in history. If the human race lives that long, knock on wood. But
I,
yeah.
don't even joke like that, bro.
I know, yeah. It's climate change or fallout land, either or could happen. We'll see. No, no, well, like maybe circle back to talking a little bit about faith. And we were talking about the Christian fundamentalists and the administration. I did want to take a second. This is our post-Easter episode, and sometimes we talk a little bit more about theology than we usually do. But I think it is important pointing out, like all the perverse um misuse of Christianity and Jesus over Easter weekend. You heard some of the speeches from Pete Hegseth and even like the president make you want to your stomach just churn. But I think it is worth pointing out too that like there's a lot of really great work being done by people who fall more into the liberation theology camp. I even think here locally, Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War is run by several local clergy. We've had a lot of clergy here in Kalamazoo participate in actions, defending immigrant rights, LGBTQ community, etc. Um, and of course, on the national level, Poor People's Campaign being led by people like Reverend William Barber, Chris Hedges, who's been a long-standing critic of U.S. empire, also comes from that tradition. And I think it's worth noting, like especially the time when you have people like Pete Hegseth taking this kind of absolutely like misused, misappropriated version of Christianity and using it to justify these war crimes in Iran. It's also important to highlight that 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 history of uh kind of liberation theology has also been one of the main, like that's been one of the mainline pulses in a lot of movements throughout American history. Of course, the Black freedom struggle comes to mind almost immediately. But it's important to note that, like, these oh I'm wolves in sheep's clothing. I'm trying to think of a more apt biblical metaphor, but like these money changers in the temple, these folks, they act as though they have a monopoly on Christianity and the Christian faith. When of course, like most of the stuff they're saying would make Jesus want to yak or grab a whip. Um, so like, I don't know. It's something that I like to talk about around this time of year, especially coming from, I came from a tradition that is a little bit more unorthodox, the Church of Guy Argo. It's like kind of in-home Bible study on Saturdays. And I'm a person who kind of I lost my faith for some time. And the thing that kind of brought me back was Standing Rock, ironically enough, which I know was led by a different like theological movement, indigenous belief, but it really showed me the power of belief as a tool for positive radical change in the world. And that's kind of what brought me back into being more religious myself. So I think people should understand, like there is this tradition of U.S. Christian nationalism, which needs to be fought and it needs to be displaced. But there's also this deep tradition of kind of Christian liberation theology that runs through the history of this country and the world. That have been at the forefront of fighting against many of the struggles. We were just talking about nuclear weapons, and I think it was a lot of the Quakers. Nuclear weapons kind of ebbed and flowed in the last few decades in public prominence, but they've done a lot of work trying to keep it in the forefront of the public eye, doing a lot of these civil disobedience and public actions against nuclear weapons. And I think, especially at a time we're really concerned about them being used by these psychos. It's worth noting like who has kind of tried to keep that in the public conscience. That was a little long-winded, Lawrence. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh no, like no, I agree. I think that there's a lot of yeah. When we're talking about the when we talk about the Black freedom struggle, when we're talking about uh other movements, not even with Christianity, and but other movements talking about using faith to uplift the poor and disenfranchised, to use faith uh, to uplift and give hope and a guideline to look at those that have been disenfranchised by the system that we have today, not just here in America, but nationally and internationally when we talk about colonialism and things of that nature. Yeah, the liberation theology uh, is something that is a through line, right? Um, but that's me personally. That's my kind of guiding principle, right? I think it was Matthew, if I remember correctly, it's Matthew 25 verses 31 through 46 when he's talking about when he's giving the parable of the sheep and the lamb, right? And it's and that is a core is a I think the core a core part of that type of liberation theology, right? When Jesus talks about um uh Lamb, I want to thank you. When I was a stranger in a strange land, you took care of me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was sick, you healed me. When I was homeless, you sheltered me. When I was naked, you clothed me. Right? When I was in jail, you didn't forget about me. And the goat was the people that Jesus was basically saying were who had the same faith as him, but were harming people, were doing it the wrong way. And the parable was they were asking, "How can we be a lamb instead of a goat?" And Jesus basically responds by saying, "If you don't do it for the least of these, don't do it for the least of these. You do not do it of me." Right. So in that core tenet of basically being, hey, the people, those that you will have looked over, those who are the most hurt, those who are the most disenfranchised. That's what my work is for. That is what this work is supposed to be helping, right?
Hmm.
And that core principle ties into your worldview. I think that ties into politics, right? What is universal health care than helping the person that's sick and can helping the one that's sick, right?
Hmm.
Food banks, making sure that we have shelter for homeless. We are talking about uh, things like universal free college. The socialists and people who are on the left are actively doing the Lord's work, figuratively and literally,
Hmm.
and that's what liberation theology connects to, because that's what we should be doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so happy Easter. My thoughts on that. Think we got about 17 minutes left, so we kind of want to start pivoting to some other things. I know we're talking about this. I don't know if we've really talked about this on the show too much, but you brought this up, and I did want to hit on it a little bit, especially our show is concerned with media, and it's kind of the shellacking that Hasan Piker is getting. He's probably, I would gamble he's probably the most famous leftist in the US. And by leftist I mean somebody who's explicitly like anti-imperialist, anti-colonial. But yeah. For most of our
Yeah,
listeners, you're young, you're online. You may have noticed that, especially from a lot of like the third way centrist type politicians, there's been a lot of just in the last couple weeks this kind of astroturf effort to try to like cancel Hasan Piker, um, even though
yeah,
as
Shout out
someone
to
pointed
Melissa.
out, it's like y'all wanted a male podcaster of the left. What's the deal? This is your dude, right? You know, or so I don't know. I've obviously got some thoughts on it, but I want to kind of frame this by saying just like obviously a lot of these attacks they have on him are in bad faith. The big one conflating opposition to Zionism as anti-Semitism. They've really been going hard in the paint with that. But I think it's also just a lot of people who don't. It's funny because they're shooting themselves in the foot. A lot of people who don't have any idea who Hassan is are hearing about him for the first time. A lot of the Democratic base is even like the hardcore blue, no matter who people are really dissatisfied with the establishment Democratic Party. So they're basically giving the dude free advertising, and they're also exposing themselves for being ridiculous. I made this comparison. Like imagine the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party was just putting out like like emails and newsletters and leaflets. It's like, you know, Andy Argo and Lawrence Calvert, they're a menace. Their show has to be stopped. They're anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera. When like there's all of these other crises going on, it's ridiculous. And I think a lot of the Democratic Party's base is also kind of recognizing it for how ridiculous it is. Lawrence.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of this, if we want to be honest, a lot of that the smear campaign. Shout out to Melissa Slotkin for being one of the dumbest people I've ever seen in politics,
Uh,
especially Michigan.
that's
Especially,
pure
I want to,
Michigan.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Her, her, and the other two candidates who I'm not gonna say their names on here, who's running against Abdul Al Sayed, because I'm voting for Abdul Al Sayed. I'm telling y'all this now. That's who you should be voting for. The other two people who are on the race, they also jumped on the bandwagon to use Hassan to attack Abdul the same way that Cuomo tried to use Hassan to attack Zoran Mamdani because they can't argue the point. So, for those who've been living under a rock, uh, Hasan Piker, along with 500 other people from around the world, went to Cuba uh, to give emergency medical aid because America is blocking oil from other countries to go to Cuba. So Ryan Grimm was there. Uh, uh, Chris Smalls, the labor activist, organizer, union
Yeah.
activist, who helped.
Kneecap, if you like your Irish, if you know your Irish rap artists, and
Yeah. So a bunch of people from around the world went, and I think it was 50, what was it, 50 or 60 tons worth of like solar panels and other equipment that they brought to Cuba to help this island because America's blockade and sanctions are literally killing babies. That's not a punchline. That's not a metaphor. That's not figurative. That's real facts. Doctors that are on the island that they interviewed said that there are rolling blackouts, and because of the rolling blackouts, they have to take their phones out, use a flashlight on their phone, and manually you use a hand respirator or a hand pump to keep the babies alive that are on ventilators. That is America's action. That's America's actions to Cuba. Shout out to Barry. Shout out to our former president, President Obama, who in one of his last good in one of the many good things that he did. There was a lot of things that he didn't do that was good, but in one of the many good things that he did, he tried to normalize relations with Cuba.
Mhm.
He tried to normalize relations with Cuba, and our last few presidents were like, nah, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. And it is literally killing people, right? But because Hassan is basically the Joe Rogan of the left, right? He has a very large voice. He's very charismatic, right? and he speaks to a very young audience.
Yeah, a lot of
The
the same
me,
people being kind of pulled in by people like Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes, which
yeah, and Joe,
and like the Democratic Party's own like strategic what is it post like some of their post-election analysis, they was like we need like we need somebody who can speak to these young men who are getting funneled into the right. And Hasan, basically he kind of stands in that particular place. That's like a big chunk of his audience.
yeah. So he live streamed from there, right? And after that live stream and him talking about how we are with our sanctions harming this country, like literally harming the people of this country, then all hell broke loose, right? Now I want to remind you, multiple media sites went there. Ryan Grimm, shout out to Ryan Grimm because Ryan Grimm went on
Yeah.
Newsmax, defended the reason why he went, and he put it was BTA, it was Belt Two
Yeah.
when the news.
You know the words, folks. Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
radio. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because the newscaster tried to do a gotcha interview, and Ryan wasn't having it. So shout out to Ryan Grimm. But after that, because in Michigan, Abdullah Sayed is running against a fake progressive Democrat and a
hmm
APAC aligned Democrat, and both of them are APAC aligned Democrats. They're using Hassan to smear him and to say that he's no longer welcome in the party. I want y'all to think about how much this is a slap in the face and an insult in the people in power insulting the intelligence of the American people that they took out New York ads, New York Times ads, MS Now and MSNBC and ABC have all tried to, and CNN all try to throw him under the bus, and they all have had glowing op-eds talking about how he's a progressive fighter. They all tried to smear him, and it's like, why? Because Hassan and his viewpoints, the American, especially when it comes to the war in Iraq, this current war, when it comes to our affiliation with Israel, when it comes to not tying Judaism, the faith of Jewish people, to Zionism, and how Zionism is a uh, how Zionism is an ethno state, right wing religious political movement, is not tied to the faith of Judaism, and decoupling that, right? And that talking about the Israeli state and its actions is not talking about the people, the Jewish people, and their faith, right? And he's done, and conflating the two, merging the two, is where we are getting anti-Semitic tropes and a lot of bad faith critiques, because some of those critiques, like Candace Owens and that Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes does, are based in anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Piker, yeah, Piker's has been. There are 30-minute compilations of him breaking down the difference between Judaism and Zionism, and how conflating the two is anti-Semitic, and
Oh yeah,
anti-Semitic.
yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out because, like, again, a lot of these, like, the third way strategy, which again, third way is like the corporate centrist kind of wing of the Democratic Party. But that whole line of attack about him being anti-Semitic, when, as you're mentioning, he does a ton of like anti-Semitic deprogramming. Like, I bumped into somebody last time I went to Chicago where I was at a bar, and you could tell she was a Nick Fuentes listener, and like is was like so close to understanding like certain aspects of how like power is consolidated, but in the place where you should logically conclude capitalists are running everything. Oh my goodness. It's the Jews. The Jews. Oh, the Jews are running everything because they're somehow magical and evil and there's like a cabal. And what Hassan does really well, especially that young audience who's like so susceptible to that, is like, no, this is mystical, anti-Semitic, like racist hogwash to distract you from the fact that these are the mechanics of colonialism and capitalism. Unfortunately, it's much because the corporate Democrat they need to die on the hill of capitalism. It is problematic for just to have somebody in their tent who is kind of pointing out the emperor and how he has no clothes. So instead of embracing this voice that is catching a much needed demographic, they need to smear him and excise him from the party because his ideas are dangerous to their donors.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, yes, and and I mean, this man streams online 8 hours a day. You're gonna say something that's gonna be hyperbolic. You're gonna say something that's poor taste. Uh, there's a lot of things that he has said that has definitely been um that was clipped out of context. There's a whole conversation on the bulwark. I don't like the bulwark. I'm not gonna lie to you, but the main host of the bulwark and the right wing co-founder had a conversation about Hassan, and I want to and it was one of the most ridiculous conversations I've ever seen because the lady who is saying Hassan shouldn't be a part of the coalition to fight back against Trump used to be a Republican. She
Hmm.
used to be a Republican.
These
She
Lincoln
celebrated.
Project people, folks. If only the Democratic Party could be more like George W. Bush. That's like their whole goal. It's just,
Uh, they pulled up clips from of her. So the internet does what the internet does. After she goes on this tirade about how Assange shouldn't be welcome in the party and how he should be condemned. Uh, right before the election of Trump versus VP Harris, and she was celebrating the fact that VP Harris was sounding like a neocon. That that she was celebrating that that VP Harris was talking about having the most deadliest fighting force in the world. That we're gonna have the strongest military in the world. That that was basically sounding like a neocon. And one of the bulwark people was like, "Yo, did the neocons take over the Democratic Party?" Yes, yes, they did. We brought in former Republicans, and the thing that makes me the most angry, and I was like, "Girl, you're a Republican. That means the anti-woman legislation that George W. Bush and that Republicans been was pushing. You voted for that. You spent your entire life, the majority of your life, as a Republican. That was the basis for anti-black, anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ plus laws. Meanwhile, Hassan was working with Black Lives Matter and other anti-racist groups.
mhm.
He has funded and helped put money into um, uh, LGBTQ plus groups. He spends a majority of the time talking to his audience and people who would listen about LGBTQ rights, about how America's anti-black and anti-black. He's done a lot of things, and there are things that I don't even agree with him on. There's a number of things that I don't agree with him on.
Oh, same. Yeah. He's a bit.
But
He's a bit. He isn't far left enough.
no, no.
I
So,
just know.
but
Uh,
when politicians do listen to Hassan and are more aggressive and or using the media strategy or talking about the policies that Hassan talks about, you get the things you get people like Zoran Mamdani. You get things like what
yeah.
AOC just recently did at at a Democratic Socialist meeting, right? When she
Yeah,
said
a lot
when
of
she
it
re-
too. Not to, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's like it's just so much of it is the consultant class of the Democratic Party is just fuming that like this strategy that they've said for years, progressive politics don't play. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it's like it's working. It's the proof is in the pudding, and they are just so mad about it.
yeah, like dog, like recently, the thing that yes, recently the thing that ALC just did, which is now is going to be a litmus test for everybody else. Um, no, we should not be
Are you
giving
talking about the
offensive.
Iron Dome funding thing?
Yeah, we should
Okay,
not
and
be giving
just a
offensive
reminder
weapons.
too, like that was also like a lot of public pressure made that happen, and it's yeah, it's that's another reason why it's important to get people elected who are more like vulnerable to public pressure. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
But that was a thing that Hassan said and was talking about, and he was, and again, because he has their phone numbers, he has these politicians' phone numbers, he's talked to their comms team, and he's communicated that to saying that should be the standard. And then now it's not just AOC. Ro Khanna's also said the same thing. And these are all people who didn't throw Hassan under the bus. These are all the same people who was like, Dog, Hassan was at the DNC when VP Harris invited Hassan to stream at the DNC. She wanted him there and his audience and speaking about how the Democratic Party will be better and how the country will be better under her leadership.
Hmm.
How hypocritical is it that the same people who let him at the DNC National Convention is now saying that he should not be that, and some of those people, some of those same numbnuts, are now saying that he should not be allowed in the party.
Yeah, no, for real. No.
You're
Um,
you you are harming your chances of us being reelected when you are kicking out people who are the best mouthpieces to explain why the Democrats are better than the current regime and Republicans at large. You're
all
shooting
right.
yourself in the foot.
Okay, we are a little bit over time, so I'm gonna wrap up. I guess I'll just say, like, hey, if Third Way wants to come after our show next, by all means, I would love the free publicity. It's- do this the same favor you've done for Hassan, please.
Yeah,
All right, any
if
last
there
thoughts before we wrap up, Lawrence?
the uh 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 I'm still a lion from consciously. Education is elevation. Make sure that you're staying read up and staying and keeping on your P's and Q's because there's a lot of misinformation out here and we don't have time for it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. This has been Media Ciphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and the Media Ciphers Kalamazoo podcast on most podcasting apps. Until next time, everybody, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.